Well, guys, after many months, the show that we have all been waiting for has finally returned with a premiere that is as confident as ever and seems to have not missed a beat.
Don't change the channel, don't touch that dial. We got it all on UHF. Take off your sneakers.
Hey guys, it's come over the season premiere of Stranger Things, Season 2, Episode 1, MADMAX, and I was obviously very excited for this premiere. You guys know I absolutely loved, Season 1. I thought it was a fantastic start to this series, and I thought it was one of Netflix's most wholly original shows, and that's one of the things I love, is that a lot of their shows, they're derived from books and things like that, but this show was really its own thing, and that's something I really did love about it. But I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of fearing for this premiere. When you have a first season that is as strong as the first season of Stranger Things, it is a concern that they're not going to be as strong and that they're just going to become a bit overzealous and become just a bit too confident where they think they can just kind of do anything. This is something that Unreal had a problem with last year. Preacher definitely had a problem with that. Last year. And The Flash also, I thought, very much followed that in its past few seasons, but Stranger Things, I was very worried, was going to follow that same type of storytelling. However, one episode in, I know this is only the premiere, but it does not seem like that is something to worry about. This show hasn't missed a beat. I really love this premiere. They did a great job of reintroducing us to everyone, but also expanding their source material, expanding this world, and that's something they do right off the bat in this first episode, in this first scene, where we start off not in Hawkins, but in Pittsburgh, and I really like this because besides Hawkins, Indiana, we haven't really seen what's been going on in other parts of the world. Is this just a thing that's been happening to, to that particular place, or is it going on in other parts? And we see that that is definitely the case. We see there's a group of masked figures. They run out of a building. They get into their getaway van, and as they drive off, a police car gives chase. One of the robbers tells the driver to pull into an alley going the wrong way. They narrowly avoid the oncoming cars and get clear, only for more police cars to come after them, and the robber tells one of the women, Callie, to do the same. She tells the driver to head into a tunnel, and as the police follow them, Callie concentrates, and the police officer in the lead car, Adams, hallucinates the tunnel collapsing in front of them, and they break to a halt, slamming into each other. He staggers out sick and discovers that the tunnel is actually intact, so they drive out the other side, and she wipes the blood from her nose, and right when that happened, I was like, holy shit, she's connected to 11. Not only that, but it turns out she actually is 008, and I thought that was a great way to start things off, because already we have so many questions. Where's Callie from? What connection does she have to 11? Was she also working with Brenner? I mean, there's so many things just going through her head, and this is exactly how they expand the world. I mean, this is stuff that I don't think we thought about in season 1. I think 11 was such an interesting character. I always kind of knew that there definitely were more like her out there, but I didn't know that they were so closely related in that sense, where they basically are very similar in that way, and I'm definitely interested in getting more into this character right off the bat here. So we then go to Hawkins, and people are prepping for Halloween, which I like that that's the setting for this season. It came out in October. It's very timely. It makes sense to put it in Halloween, but Dustin's looking around his house. He finally finds the quarters he needs and calls Lucas on the radio, and we're just reminded of how great chemistry these four boys really have. And I was worried that because of how great the three of them were, that because we didn't see a lot of Will, that he was going to feel out of place, and that Noah Schnapp wasn't going to hold up in the way the other three did. But honestly, judging from this premiere, he could end up being the strongest of the four, because he blew me away in this premiere, I have to say. But basically, he says that he's tops of the other games. Keith corrects him, and basically we see Mike sneaks into Nancy's room, takes her quarters. When she comes in, he tells her that he'll pay her back. He runs out and rides off on his bike before she can stop him, and the friends then meet at the arcade. Joyce drops off Will, and it's great to see a more sort of together Joyce. I mean, Joyce was someone who she really went off a rocker last season. She was freaking out, and she was just not at all in a good place. So to see her a lot more composed, I definitely enjoyed seeing. And Will then joins his friends. Dustin plays Dragon's Lair but gets killed, and when he says that he's top of the other games, Keith corrects him. Dustin runs over and discovers that a new player, MADMAX, has actually topped him, and that's where the episode actually gets its title from. So they ask Keith who MADMAX is, and he says that he'll tell them if Mike sets up a date for him with Nancy. And as they argue, Will then looks outside. He sees a storm gathering, and he turns and discovers that everyone in the arcade is just gone. We don't know how, but they've just disappeared, and it's very similar to what we got at the end of the finale last year, where suddenly everything just disappears. The arcade turns into this overgrown ruin from the upside down. He goes outside, and Mike calls to him. Everything just snaps back to normal, and then they go back inside to play, which again, I really love the scene. It shows that whatever trauma Will went through, it's far from over. He may think that this is done. He may think that he's gone to the upside down and everything's fine, but it's clear that's definitely not the case. There's still a great evil out there that is definitely coming after him, and again, I really do like the way they set that up here. But the next day, Hopper then arrives at the police station, and investigative reporter Murray Bauman is waiting for him, and Murray says they need to talk, but Hopper doesn't want to hear it, and the deputies laugh at Murray, says that there's a Russian spy presence in Hawkins, and that there have been reports of a girl with psionic abilities, which of course, you know, Hopper knows this is true, but he doesn't want to leak this information out. I think he knows that, you know, Eleven doesn't want to be this, like, public figure. She wants to be very much to herself, and he gives him 5 minutes. Murray says that there's been rumors of a girl with a shaved head seen around town. He figures that it's tied to Barb's disappearance, and I like the way the show is putting the focus back on that, because I will admit, that was one of my problems with the first season. Barb just sort of disappeared, and everyone just kind of forgot, except Nancy. So I'm glad to see that this season they are actually going to give us closure in regards to that disappearance. Is Barb dead? What happened to her? Did she go to the other side? I mean, that's something I'm definitely interested in getting into, and I'm glad to see the show is shedding some light on that. But Jim is less than impressed. He's interrupted when he gets a call from the local pumpkin patch owner, Merrill, that his pumpkins have actually been contaminated by his vengeful neighbor, and Jim tells Murray he has to tend to business and then leaves. So again, I like seeing the side of Hopper. Hopper was someone who last season, you know, he was the drunkard, and we've seen that he has very much evolved. He's just as much on top of things, but he's a lot more quick. You can tell that he definitely is buying into a lot more of this stuff, and I've really enjoyed seeing that here. So probably the most surprising stuff in this episode was with Nancy, who, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't the hugest fan of what they did with her in the beginning of this episode. And I say the beginning because we'll talk about that. But at first, you know, I thought that after what we saw with Nancy, where she was breaking down in that bathroom, and, you know, she just kind of, after that one scene with Steve, she just kind of went away from everyone. I thought that Nancy was gonna be in Jonathan's position, where she was more quiet and just very regretful and, you know, not kind of becoming a bit of an outcast, but it doesn't seem like that's the case here, because Steve and Nancy are parked outside the school. Nancy was over his essay for early application at college, and he asked her to help him that night at his house. Nancy reminds him that he was going to come to dinner, and it's a very similar scene to what we got in season 1. The difference here is that Steve isn't as persistent. He's a lot more understanding, he's a lot more toned down, and again, we really do see how much Steve has evolved here. He started off, he was really the douche of the show, and he just wasn't really a likable guy, but now we've seen that he really has transformed, and I enjoyed seeing that. He figures that he might be better off working for his dad in insurance, and he'd be there for Nancy's senior years. Remember, Steve is about 2 years older than Nancy, and Nancy, I believe, is a sophomore. He is a senior, so obviously there is that complication there. So they kiss just as the new kid, Billy, pulls up in the hot rod, and this character, I understand that this show is, you know, trying to be like an 80s movie, but this just felt really, really cheesy and over the top, even for you know, a show that is paying homage to it. It just felt a little too cheesy here. He comes out of the hot rod, and he and his sister Max get out. The local girls are checking out Steve's ass, and I really wasn't into this scene. I thought it was kind of dumb overall what they did with him, but it's cool to see Dacre Montgomery here. I've liked what I've seen of him up till now, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him as a character throughout the season. But Will then goes to his locker and discovers that someone has left an article of him with the words "Zombie Boy" written on his photo, and I really like this scene because now that Will has returned, it's almost as if, everyone's seeing a ghost, and obviously he's getting made fun of for it. No one's really taking it seriously. He goes to class where Mr. Clark talks about the human brains, and the principal brings in Max, and the boys figure that, holy shit, this is actually MADMAX. This is the girl that we've been searching for, and we don't get a lot with this character in this episode, except that she's definitely a tomboy, she likes to be called Max, and she very much likes video games. That's really it, but honestly, I didn't need a ton of stuff with her. I really like the introduction, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Sadie Sink does do, throughout the course of the season, because to me at least it seems like she's going to be kind of filling the void of 11. I don't know if we're going to see 11 as much this season. Well, I mean, judging by the end of this episode, I think we'll definitely see her for sure, but I don't think she's going to play as prominent of a role as she did in season 1, and I think that Max is actually going to fill that void here, which I'm perfectly fine with from what we saw here. But Joyce is then working at the general store, and we see this character Bob Newby comes in, and Bob is actually dating Joyce, who is played by Sean Astin, and sure, they rush into this relationship a little bit, but like I said, after the, very erratic sort of side of Joyce that we saw last year, it's just really nice to see her settle down and actually have a really nice life and have a guy in her life. It's nice to see, you're rooting for her character, and I really enjoyed that. He asks if they have pumpkins in any colors, go into the back, they kiss, and Joyce finally says she has to get back to work and says that she'll see that night at the house for movie nights, and you get the sense these two have been dating for a while. We don't get a ton with their relationship here, but I really did enjoy what we got with them overall. It was just nice to see Joyce happy for once, and again, that's just very different from what we saw in season 1, and it definitely is very appreciated here. So Hopper then drives out to the pumpkin patch, which is filled with rotting pumpkins, and Merrill says that his neighbor Eugene is responsible and figures that Eugene sent out one of his field hands out, and Hopper notices something moving in the nearby field. He goes to investigate it, and a crow flies up, but there's no one there. So there's clearly something going on there. We don't know what that's about, but we then see this girl Tina. She's handing out invitations to her Halloween bash, and Nancy gives one to Jonathan and tells him that he's going, and Jonathan has gone through a bit of a transformation this season in that he's not as creepy looking. Not as many people see him as, just the weird kid taking pictures. He clearly is, they clearly are a lot more accepting of him, and they want him to include him in their group more, and he refuses to go to this party, but Nancy says he can't sit alone home on Halloween. Jonathan says that he's going trick-or-treating with Will, and it makes sense. I mean, Will's been gone for a while now. I think Jonathan just wants to spend as much time he can with him just to make up for lost time, but Nancy figures he'll be home by 8 by himself, and as they arrive at Nancy's locker, Steve grabs her and they kiss. Jonathan walks away, and Nancy then notices him going. So you do see that her feelings for Jonathan is still there. I definitely did enjoy seeing that. I was just surprised with what we did get with Nancy in regards to this episode, but Dustin and the others then watch Max skateboarding. She drops something and goes inside. The boys run over. Dustin digs in the garbage, finds a note telling them to stop spying on her, and I thought that was pretty funny that she's actually onto them there. But Principal Coleman comes over, tells Will that Joyce is there, and everyone just starts looking at Will. And again, it makes sense because Will's been gone for so long. He's kind of the talk of the town right now, and it's not really in his favor. Will is clearly someone who he just wants to be treated like, one of the guys. That's really all he wants. He wants to be treated like his friend. He doesn't want to be this, amazing figure, and it's clear he feels very vulnerable here. So Coleman takes him outside to where Joyce is waiting. Mike and the others watch and figure that Will is always quiet when he has to go in, and Joyce then drives Will out of town, asks if he's feeling any better, and after a moment, a distracted Will says that he is. So basically, she tells him to tell them what he felt and saw, and she'll be there with him, so we'll be okay. And they pull up to where Jim is waiting outside of the government facility, and they go inside and put Will through medical tests. And we then meet Dr. Sam Owens, and Dr. Owens essentially is taking Brenner's place. Now, I don't know if he's going to be as villainous as Brenner was, but he definitely is going to fill that void this season, and it doesn't seem like we have anything to worry about because Paul Reiser is already Grace's character. He comes in, he chats with Will, asks about the episode he had, and agents monitor Will as he describes his vision at the arcade, and Owens then pushes him for details. Will's EKG ratings go up as he says that he sensed evil and it wanted to kill everyone else. So it's clear that Owens is doing some meticulous research into this stuff, and I'm interested in seeing where that's going to go. But after the session, he tells Joyce and Hopper that it's going to get worse before it gets better. He explains it's the anniversary of the event, so Will have more episodes and personality changes, and Owens tells Joyce to treat Will normally and let him lead the way. So he assures her that the former government people are gone, assures Joyce that he is in fact on her side, and outside, she complains to Hopper. Hopper says that post-traumatic stress is real. He asks about Bob, and Joyce says that they're good, and Hopper rather unconvincingly says he's happy for her. You know that he definitely does have feelings for Joyce. We've been able to sense this since season 1, and it seems like they really are going all in on that this season, but he tells Joyce to call him if things get worse. Joyce drives away with Will, and Jim then looks up, and Owens then waves to him. So, again, something's going on with Owens. We see the scene where as Hopper goes, an assistant tells Owens that they're ready for him. He goes to this underground lab where a soldier with a flamethrower dons a protective suit. He enters an airlock. He enters the next chamber and approaches the upside-down portal, and he used the flamethrower on the organism in front of it. So, clearly, he's doing extensive research on this stuff. It's just going to be interesting to see where they really do take this character in the coming episodes. So Dustin and Lucas watch the arcade, Billy drops Max off, and brother and sister argue. Billy drives off as Max gives him the finger, and she goes inside and plays Dig Dug, and Dustin and Lucas keep watching her there, clearly very fascinated by what she's doing. And that night, Karen tells Mike to pick out his toys for the yard sale, and Mike says they already took away his Atari, and Karen points out that he's been acting up recently. Ted vaguely joins in, and Steve and Nancy go to the Holland house. They have KFC with Barb's parents, and I got the sense that this is like a regular sort of ritual that they've been doing. You know, they just sit down with them because they are kind of lonely. I mean, their daughter is gone. They don't really have much left in this, you know, town. So I think Nancy and Steve are just trying to help them out through it. But Nancy asks about the for sale sign in their yard. Mrs. Holland says that they hired Murray to look into Barb's disappearance, and Mr. Holland says that Murray's going to do what Hopper hasn't been capable of doing and finding Barb. And that is something that Hopper didn't do last season. He was so focused on finding Will. That was like his main thing. Everything else, you know, that was paramount. Everything else just was kind of secondary, and everything else just kind of pushed to the side because of that. And, you know, he didn't really focus on finding Barb. So they hope they'll find her, and they're selling the house to pay for him. And Mrs. Holland says that for the first time, they're actually hopeful. And Nancy then excuses herself. And finally, we get the scene that I've been waiting for, where she goes to the bathroom upset. There's a picture of Barb on the counter, and she turns it down and cries. And this really made up for, what we were getting with her throughout the episode, which wasn't bad, let me just say. It just wasn't really clicking with me, like, where I thought they were going with Nancy. This is definitely closer to where I thought they were going. It reminded me of how great of an actress, it reminded me how great of an actress she really is, the actress that plays Nancy. I can't think of her name right now, but it reminded me really how great she is in this show, and I really did love this scene, because to me, it seems like she's trying to carry herself, and she's trying to get herself together, but this loss has greatly impacted her, and she definitely does want justice. She wants the justice for Barb very badly, and she'll do whatever she can to make sure that Barb is accounted for, and that she's not just ignored, because she's really been the only one that has been kind of grieving, and it really has kind of messed her up a bit. And I definitely did enjoy seeing that here. I like seeing that. I mean, I don't like seeing Nancy in pain, obviously, but I do like that they are paying attention to Nancy's grieving process here, because if Barb really is gone, I think this is really going to be the season where Nancy is finally able to kind of come to terms with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that does go. But in the basement, Mike then picks his toys for the yard sale. He keeps his favorites, and he looks over at the nest where Eleven stayed. And obviously, this is very hard for Mike. You know, him and Eleven were very close. He clearly did like her, and he picks up his radio and calls to 11. And again, just like Steve and Nancy, I got the sense this is a regular thing for Mike. He does this quite often, and he says that he's still there, asks her to say something if she's still out there. He gets no response, puts down the radio. Dustin then calls in and asks what he's doing on the channel, and for a second he thinks that it could be 11, but he realizes that, again, instead, it's all about this MADMAX thing, which Mike clearly doesn't care about. He's just not interested in it. He's too focused, again, on getting 11 back, and you know, he just doesn't seem to care much about this Max hunt. So Dustin tells Lucas that they stick with the plan. Lucas worries that Mike might not agree, but Dustin doesn't care. He still wants to press on. He still wants to continue searching for her. He's very fascinated by this girl, and he really wants to track her down. So he rides to his house, hears something digging in the garbage. Dustin figures it's the cat, goes inside. Something then shakes in the garbage can. You know very well that that's not what's going on, but again, I like that we're seeing more of just Dustin and Lucas together, because yes, there was a lot of, you know, the focus was on Mike and 11, so I do like that we're focusing a little bit more on Dustin and Lucas, and I do hope they give them more to do throughout the season. So Bob then takes a video of Joyce saying that it's the future. Will is drawing pictures of himself as Zombie Boy when Jonathan comes in and tells him to pick what video they watch. He sees the sketch, and I really like the scene because, of course, because of the fact that, you know, Noah Schnapp was absent for most of the season, we didn't really get to see a lot of chemistry between these two brothers, and we really do see it here. We see how Will's disappearance and now his, you know, reappearance has really strengthened their bond, and Will tells his brother that he's Zombie Boy. Will insists that everyone treats him like he's going to break and says it just makes him feel like more of a freak, and Jonathan insists that he isn't, but Will says that he is, and after a moment his brother tells him that he is a freak, but says that being a freak is the best, and he's the same. And he's, you know, accept the fact that, yeah, he's a little bit weird. And Jonathan tells Will that he always hangs out with him because they're best friends. Bob then comes by, looks at the videos, picks one and goes, and they're then watching the movie. Jonathan and Will are very bored while Bob and Joyce laugh, and the phone rings. Joyce jumps, and I like this scene because the last time the phone rang, that is when Joyce got the call that, you know, Will was missing, and obviously, you know, things like that do still freak her out. We saw that last season, and we see that's still the case. Phones do still kind of freak her out, but Bob tells her to let it go, and at the facility, a technician is at his console when the alarms go off, and Will then goes to the bathroom. Afterwards, he hears something rumbling. He hears the storm outside. The front door opens, revealing the Upside Down. He goes outside. Something vast and tentacles appears in the sky, so there clearly is some sort of creature out there. It's not the Demogorgon, but there definitely is something out there, and we then get to the ending here where Hopper drives out to the forest. He avoids the tripwire that he sat. He knocks at the door of a cabin. 11 unlocks the doors. Jim goes to the refrigerator. He gets a beer. Discovers she set out TV dinners, and she complains that he didn't signal because she's late. He tells her that he won't be again, and you get the sense that these two have pretty much been living together ever since, and that is the way this episode ends. So, yeah, like I said, guys, overall, this was a very promising premiere. There were a lot of things that I really did enjoy about this. Let's first talk about 11 and Hopper, because I really do like where they're taking him this season. And I predicted that we were going to go in this direction because we know how profound of a loss Hopper's daughter really was for him. And I think him now living with 11, while that obviously isn't his daughter, which for a while I thought that's where they were going, that 11 was actually going to be his daughter. I'm glad to see they didn't go in that direction because I like this even more. This is kind of him getting to raise someone even though it's not actually his daughter. In a sense, it's kind of helping him with that, and I definitely really did enjoy that. And Hopper and 11 didn't really have a ton of scenes last season, so I do like the fact that they are actually giving 11 more to do, because if you would have just put her back with Mike, Dustin, and Lucas, it would have just felt like a retread, so I'm glad to see that they're going in a completely different direction, and I really like seeing that here. But I'm also very interested in Callie, because we saw her briefly in the beginning of this episode, and we don't know what exactly that's about, what connection she has to Brenner. I'm definitely interested in seeing how that all does turn out, and it's clear they are planning to expand this world this season, and I am definitely all for that, because, you know, there's definitely more going on in this world than just Hawkins, Indiana. There are definitely a lot more stranger things, if you will, going on besides that, and I really enjoy enjoyed seeing that here. As far as Will, I love where the show is taking Will. I love that he has PTSD. I love the fact that everyone kind of sees him as like, well, again, I don't love this stuff, but I like the way the show is handling it, that he's being looked at as sort of a freak, and the way people see him, you know, they now see him as just a ghost or just some weird creature because he just randomly come back after all this searching, and you know, he kind of needs to accept it, and I really did like seeing that. I like seeing that he's kind of trying to adjust to his surroundings, and I'm looking forward to seeing the way all that turns out. I love the bond that Jonathan and Will really do have. I think that's definitely, again, it's something we didn't see in the first season, and that's something I think that a second season needs to do very well. You can't just do a retread, so you have to have characters interact that didn't interact before, and it does seem like that's where they're headed here, and I definitely am looking forward to seeing how that turns out. Also, Max, we didn't see much for her in this episode, but I'm already really liking her character. I think she's going to blend in really well with Dustin and Lucas, and I think it's interesting that Mike isn't interested, but it makes sense. He's clearly not over 11. He still really does care about her, and I think he wants her back. You know, even though he knows that any sort of relationship he wants with her is, you know, virtually a fantasy. It's just not going to happen. He doesn't care. He's so determined to get her back that he will do whatever it takes, and I really like seeing that with this character. You know, Finn Wolfhard really killed it last season. It seems like this season is no different, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that all does turn out. As far as things go with Joyce, I really like seeing Joyce in a happier place this season. I'm interested in seeing really what's going on there. But I'm also very interested in Dr. Owens, because obviously he is replacing Brenner. He seems very fascinated by what's going on, and it's clear that this guy definitely wants answers. I mean, he's doing tests on these aliens, and, well, not aliens, but all these various creatures, and we don't know what's up there in the sky, but whatever it is, it clearly is messing with Will. And I'm sure we're going to find out sooner than later, but I'm definitely interested in seeing how that's going to go. I also love that the show is actually shedding lights on Barb. Barb was a character that, yes, Hopper really didn't search for her. She was ignored by the whole town. It's clear that Nancy does want answers. She wants to know that her friend, is she dead? Is she not? It definitely has fucked her up in a very visceral way, and we definitely do see that here. And like I said, really my only complaint with this episode was, at first, the characterization in Nancy, I felt was just a bit off, the way that she was just completely the same as in season 1, but it makes sense. I mean, she was known as one of the popular girls. She was one of the ones that everyone wanted to hook up with, you know, she was just so together with herself. So now the Barb has disappeared. Yes, she is trying to be that same popular, you know, together girl, but she can't shake Barb away. I mean, obviously, Barb and her had a really great friendship, and I think Nancy, she does feel guilty for what went down, and I think we're going to see throughout the season her trying to hold back her grief, but she's just going to have more and more of a hard time repressing it until she eventually does just accept what went down and, you know, get some sort of an answer. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing the way they're going to do that. I really did enjoy that. And like I said, yes, I do think they did rush things with Joyce and Bob a little bit, but it makes sense. I like seeing Joyce in a happier place. I like seeing things a little bit different for Joyce, and I think it's going to be interesting to see the way that all this go down. Other than that, guys, this was pretty much everything I hoped that this premiere would be. It wasn't too fast-paced. It really was paced very well. It seems like the show really hasn't missed a beat at all. It's really, it's clear the show understands what these, you know, what we want and what we don't, and what works in the show and what doesn't, and it's just such a treat to see. A lot of showrunners have a problem with that, and to see the Duffer brothers understanding, okay, this is what works in our show and this is what doesn't, I just really do enjoy watching here. I really did love this premiere, guys, and I am going to give the season premiere of Stranger Things Season 2, Episode 1, Mad Max, an A-. So over, guys, doing the season premiere of Stranger Things. Most guys saw this episode overall, loved your thoughts, and I am so excited to talk about the show again. Definitely, I'm going to try to finish this very soon. I know this is pretty much the talk of everyone's weekend. I know most of you probably binged it, but you guys know this is a show that I want to review each episode individually. Obviously, I'm not going to binge it for that very reason. So that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
She's not